So, you know, I have to say my session with you last week changed my life.
Oh, man, thank you.
Yeah, it really did. And I I I felt, and I still do at this moment, changed my orientation about life in general. And it's a positive, kind of just ease, lifting, more openness, more comfort with the world as it is.
Mm, mm. Sounds familiar. And 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 also kind of reinforcing and acknowledging someone that something that I I say very often that I love working with people who have a lot of chi, right? People who've done a lot of work on themselves and they don't have anything to prove, and a lot of the ego is already dissolved, and those folks can take a little adjustment, a little tweak, and parlay it into a huge advantage. Um, and so, I think that's explaining a lot why you got what you did so much out of it. Because everyone did the same session, everyone had the same experience, and there's a whole range of, like wow, like bang crash zoom, and well, yeah, it was pretty nice. I mean, in general, everybody has a good experience, but I love how specifically you describe the benefits because those are that's what I would hope for and expect. So
Mm. Well, I'm I'm just glad that I could have this opportunity to, have some more time with you.
yeah,
And I'm a big martial artist. Um, and underlying that, I think I'm also a very spiritual kind of person. I don't lean in one specific thing, but I do believe in a higher consciousness for sure, a higher power, something greater than me. And in some ways, I kind of believe that martial arts or life or being successful, I think that there is this kind of underlying kind of gut, kind of ability to operate. I call it in the gray zone after all the facts are known. You still kind of have to have this gut instinct, this connection to yourself, to what's in front of you. And I'm kind of, it struck me, when I was in our session with you, that breathing, something so fundamental, but so forgotten or lost, so to speak, is so core
yeah.
to that. And I'm kind of curious about your thoughts. I mean, you've obviously done this a long time and seen a lot of people, and I kind of think that that there's so much more about breathing in general.
Yeah. Well, the simplest things, the most basic things, they always turn out to be the most powerful. And and they're the things that we overlook and we underestimate and we take for granted. And a lot of people would say, breathing, what is there to learn? I breathe in, I breathe out, and they kind of blow off the profound potential in that. And um, and so it's it's a typical thing, breathing. And 40, 50 years ago, when I was started being a missionary for the breath. I got that a lot from people, breathing, schmathing, meditation, schmeditation, yoga, schmoga. They just weren't ready, and it just sounded too woo woo, you know. Um, but on the same token, um, if you can if you can break a brick, I mean, if you can muster up enough chi focus to break a brick, you can mend a bone. It's the same energy used in a different way. If you can throw somebody to the ground, you can build up their immune system. It's the same energy used a different way. So that's why I love working with seasoned martial artists, with people who've been in the fire, come out the other side, and then they're more conscious, they're more aware. They recognize subtle things, like in martial arts, just judging distance, like,
Mm.
or someone on a battlefield and a bomb goes off a mile away and they jump. Well, somebody's been on the battlefield lots of times. They don't even flinch because they already know something. And so, you got a fist coming at you and you see it's going to slide by you. You don't bother overreacting and stuff. And so, I think that kind of ability, the sensitivity that is only developed through time and practice, gives people a little edge when it comes to the breathing, because they sense more subtle things. They're more sensitive to little subtle things, and they can derive more benefit because of that increased awareness, because of that lack of reactivity. It's more of like chosen response rather than automatic reaction. And not everybody has done the kind of training that allows them to develop those kind of abilities, let's say, even situational awareness, or like that simple example of judging distance. It's like second nature. You've trained enough and you kind of get it. So and that's something uh, that that everyone has developed to some degree in some situations, in some circumstances. They're really in the flow and they got it, but as soon as they're out of their realm, they're floundering around like everybody else. And in martial arts, a good example of that. People who they've got black belts, but they've never been in a life and death situation. And the first time that happens, all of
Mhm.
their cool moves just go out the window. And if your heart rate goes up to 175 beats a minute, your fine motor skills are lost. And, it's just gross motor skills that kind of work in that time. And, um, and so a lot of things come together that allow people to get more benefit from breath work than others, just because of, life has given them opportunities to develop certain skills and abilities, and that enables them to really cash in on what breathing has to offer. That they're willing to have a Zen like beginner's mind, like, I don't know everything, and I think I'll be kind of curious, and why not try something? Uh, and and the and the and that's my job is getting people to just do the work, try it. Don't believe me. I can tell you what to expect and what can happen, but nothing beats your own experience. You practice something, you get a benefit, and you're motivated. Nobody has to convince you. Nobody has to try to prove anything. Um, and that's the best kind of motivation, right? It's not you read something in a book and you kind of see, yeah, it makes sense, but it's not embodied knowledge. It's not genuine. uh, it's secondhand. And it's tough to get away with that in breathwork because you can't fake certain things. You can come and but actually these days, I say be careful what you wish for, because 40, 50 years ago, I was going, "Yeah, I can't wait until breathing is mainstream, till doctors are prescribing it and celebrities and influencers are like swearing by it." And that's really starting to happen. But it also means that a lot of the beautiful, powerful stuff needs to be watered down to be palatable for the masses. And and it's very easy for some TikTok influencer to do one day of a Wim Hof thing, and the next day they're an expert and they've got 100,000 followers and they're just parroting what they heard, and they haven't embodied it. And so I think that's another advantage too, that that a lot of people can sense that. They can sense when somebody's coming from authentic experience and when they're just repeating something that someone else said. And that's happening more and more in the breathing world. That people are just, the old cliches are getting passed on, and it's for me, it's a little easier to sort that out. I can tell people who have really had an experience versus people who kind of understand it intellectually, and they're really good at communicating or marketing, and so they can build up a big following, and it's all based. It's like a house of cards. It collapses the first time life really tests them or confronts them, and that when your heart is racing and you get tunnel vision, you can't even put a key in the door. And the best marksmen in the world won't hit the side of a barn door, when they're off of the shooting range and not under control situations. As soon as they're really stressed and tested, all those skills go out the window, and they end up curled up on the ground in the fetal position and just hoping that the perpetrator will somehow have mercy on them. And I've seen that. I've seen guys in dojos who are really cool. They got these really cool moves and everything, but uh, there was a movie back in the '60s, and there was one scene in a grocery store where some guy was causing all kind of problems, and somebody stepped in, and or was in a bar, and they mouthed off back and forth, and the one guy took this pose and went karate, and the guy picked up a bar stool and said chair and cracked him on the head. So anyway.
No, I think you bring up something that I see happening also in the world. Like I train a lot in jujitsu right now, and I teach a lot in jujitsu, and it's become very popular, right? Today, if you're going to do a martial art, you're probably picking jujitsu or Muay Thai, and that's kind of the two primary skills in the UFC that you need today, which is ground fighting and stand-up skills. And a lot has gotten watered down, right? You have a lot of people that are teaching, but they kind of teach at a very surface level,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
and you kind of get some moves,
mhm.
but the underlying principles, the underlying core, right, has been lost.
Yeah,
And I could see what you're talking about in the world of breathing, where
yeah. Mhm.
it's becoming more mainstream, it's becoming more popular, and well, let's just do these techniques, but I don't know necessarily why or what's driving, the
Mhm.
foundation of that. And I'm kind of like, so, from your standpoint, it must you must have some kind of concerns or frustration about how, you know, how should people think about it? Because I think there's this very surface level thing of I just need to breathe in a different way so I can have a little bit less anxiety
Mhm.
versus I'm going to breathe in a way that's actually going to change my whole life.
Yeah. 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 People would like everything to change, but they're not willing to change themselves, And people who come to breath work, that's what's required. That's what's happening. So I get people. I just told a story today. I had a guy who was a golf, and some golfers, I mean, they're just crazy. I mean, they'll spend $3,000 on a stupid stick to knock the ball in the hole, and they'll pay anything to shave 2 strokes off their golf game. And and I had someone approach me, a really good golfer, wanted to be better, and I'm thinking, okay, I can breathe with you, and maybe we can knock 2 strokes off your golf game, and play with focus, play with subtle way, do things. But I'm interested in somebody who wants to see God, and it's like what's happened with yoga, like hatha yoga, for example. millions and millions of people in the world practice hatha yoga, but how many of them get the original purpose of it, the essence of it? They're just treating it like another cool exercise. Yeah, they stretch, they get flexibility, but they have no idea of the essence of it and the genuine purpose of it. And that's that superficial thing you're talking about that's very, very common. And in breath work, I mean, but the root of the word inspiration, expiration, respiration is spirit. And so, in essence, it is a spiritual practice. And some people just think of that whole world as kind of woo woo, I'm not interested in this woo woo stuff. I just want to command a room when it's my turn to talk, or I want to run faster. I want to lift a little more weights, or even some of the really beautiful benefits. I want to deal with stress, anxiety, depression, pain, manage my emotions, which are all fantastic benefits. But my hope, and I love working with people, but my hope is that in the process of using their breath for that, that on their own, they will somehow awaken to a deeper potential. And I can't shove it down their throat, and I can't try to convince them to practice for better reasons. I just have to hope that on their own that they're going to suddenly do that, and I do see it. It's like somebody who's become very successful in business. They've got power, they've got prestige, they've got status, they got all the money they want. And then they become interested in serving other people, becoming spiritual. It's like they have
Mm.
to satisfy all those other things first. And then they get around to the next thing. And so I my issue is I don't have enough patience. I mean, nothing happens fast enough for me. It's like, yeah. And so I have to like practice, of being patient and allowing everybody has their own pace and just trusting that whether they know it or not, they are drawn to breath work for a deeper reason, whether they're conscious of it or not. And so whatever the reason is that gets them in the door, okay, come on in. I'll help you with that. But I'm watching for an opportunity for them to take it to a higher level or a deeper level. And then I'm ready. I'm waiting.
So I'm kind of curious, we talked about in the session that I had with you last week, the notion that you could arrive, call it at this ideal state in different ways. Like I could meditate in theory. I could do a number of other ways to achieve this kind of result. And of course, breathing is one of these. You mentioned three different approaches to try to get to this place. You've traveled a lot, which is also very interesting to me in that you've actually gone, and visited with yogis in India and other kinds of people in China. I mean, so I'm kind of curious, do all the roads lead to the same place?
Yeah, and so many ways to skin a cat. And every great teacher, genuine teacher, and every genuine spiritual path points to the breath, touches on the breath, uses the breath in some way. Ultimately, and but not many make it the central uh, core of the practice. It's one of the things that's part of a whole collection of things, and I see it as the most important central thing. I mean, when we're playing with our breath, we're getting a handle on our energy, and we're getting a handle on our consciousness. For me, those are the two things that really are the most essential things that make us human, our energy and our consciousness. And through the breath, we get a chance to to handle both of those things, to appropriate and apply both of those things. And so it's bound to make a difference. Um, and people, I don't shy away from the word spirit anymore, because you could say the spirit of the warrior, the spirit of peace, the spirit of compassion, and then people go, yeah, okay, that's not so woo woo, right? It's a real thing. Um, and so traveling around the world, I think one of the things I've learned is I try to me if I'm working with a Buddhist, I'm going to lay on the Buddhist principles and language. If I'm with a Christian, I'm going to turn to Christian principles and stuff. I'm going to try to meet them where they're at and translate what I do into something that'll allow them to be open to it and practice it. And I love being in a country where I don't speak the language. I go to a store. I don't know what the money is. I just put it out there. They take whatever it costs, and I don't know. And I put the rest of my. I don't know. I just love that. I love. It's kind of a strange thing, but I like being in a place that I don't understand the language, for example. And I learned that the first time I went to China. Well, and I was there for a month, and I didn't realize how quiet my mind had become because people are having conversations, but it just sounds musical. It wasn't hooking me into reacting with my mind. I'm passing all these billboards and signs, and none of it is triggering my rational mind. And so, after a month of being in China, I didn't realize how quiet my mind had become until I got back to the United States. And all of a sudden, bing, everything I heard or saw was back to activating my mind again. And so I hadn't realized how quiet my mind had gotten until I got back to the United States. And it was one particular moment. I was in the grocery store just a few days after I got back, and I was still humming. I was still buzzing. I was still in a beautiful space, and I was just shopping for my favorite comfort foods because I'd been away for a month. I wanted, a few of my, favorite foods that in China I couldn't see. So I'm in the grocery store and there's these two ladies having a conversation in front of me. And it was a horrible story about some young kid that they knew who had a scholarship for a big university, and he was about to go to college, and his whole life was ahead. Everything was going so beautifully. He had his whole life. And then he got in a motorcycle accident and broke his neck. And now he's paralyzed for life. And it was such a horrible, sad story. And and that it just and I realized I'm caught up. I wasn't listening to them, but I couldn't help but hear. And so
Hmm.
at that point, and I felt so sad and I felt so triggered by the story. It was just a sad story. And so I stuck my nose into the conversation between these two ladies. And I said, I couldn't help but overhear you. And that story about that poor young guy and how, and their moral of the story was life is going along normally. And all of a sudden, a terrible thing happens and your whole life changes for the worst. And I said, there's another possibility that your life is going around normal, you have an amazingly beautiful experience and it changes your life forever. And they literally, their eyes rolled back in their head. They just didn't get it and weren't interested. It was like they had kind of a one-way thing. And um and so it's how do you get around people's mind, because sometimes that's what you need to do to it's what I need to do to get them to breathe. I have to like get over their thoughts about it and somehow communicate in a way that hey, they're willing to try it and practice it. And then it's like, okay, that's all I need. If you're willing to try, then you don't have to believe me. I don't have to try to prove anything. You're going to have an experience, and welcome to the club. And maybe you'll become a missionary for the breath too. I mean, I had such remarkable experiences. I couldn't help but share it. I had to. I wanted everybody to feel what I felt and experience what I experienced. I don't know any other way to be. And so my own experience just kept motivating me to convince as many other people to breathe as possible. Yeah.
I think for myself, when I'm in a situation like martial arts and I'm performing something, we had discussed something called, the flow state, right? And we had also talked a lot about kind of using breath as a way to get rid of the brain, right? Get rid of this part so that we could actually then connect and maybe also be part of the flow state. It so in my mind, it's very interesting. Like I find my most euphoric experiences, my most joyous experiences when I'm not here, when I am just open, free, operating as the situation bears itself to me. And I find that flowing when you're having this discussion on the mat, or you're having this discussion in the battlefield or whatever it is, and you're actually in a flow state. you know i i I think that recognition of that acknowledgement of that's maybe the case is really antithetical to how I think a lot of people think about trying to be successful in anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, breathing awakens our heart intelligence. And now it can support our mind intelligence. And breathing awakens body intelligence. And that supports mind intelligence. So instead of trying to think our way through life and just come from the head and solve all problems, we awaken heart intelligence, awaken body intelligence, and now you can really show up. And and it's the end of confusion, and decisions are more easily made. You have a yes from every cell in your body, and you don't second guess yourself because you have this solid hit about whether yes or no. And I even practice that, and I we've played in casinos, we've taken it to different situations, and should I do this or that? Okay, let me think. Should I do this? Okay, or should I do this? Aha, and so I recognize it like mental mass. Let's say that if my breathing is light and airy, pun intended, and easy, that indicates something to me. If I have to work to inhale, or I can't complete my exhales, or I feel this density like mental mass on my exhale, then I know I'm disconnected somehow. I'm not in tune. And if I
Hmm.
clear it up in my relationship to the breath, that somehow it gets corrected on whatever other levels is where the issue is, or at least it will point me. I'll have an inclination about what I need to focus on or think about or let go of or reconsider and so on. So for me, the breath really is, it offers us literally inspiration. We can be inspired by things. And that literally means to breathe them, you know. So and I don't know how to teach that. It's not. It's like trying to teach whistling or teach balance. You can't teach balance. You can learn it, but you can't teach it. So how do you teach something that cannot be taught? That's my constant problem. I'm teaching something that cannot be taught, and it can only be learned. So the best I can do is motivate people to practice so they can teach themselves. They can learn. Um, because it's kind of silly. Literally, I'm trying to teach people breathing, but breathing cannot be taught. It can just be learned. So I have to rely on people being motivated, self-directed, um, and those are the people who get the most out of breath work. They're not waiting for someone to fix them. I mean, we coach and we guide people to help them develop skills, but they got to be willing to do the work themselves. And especially in our culture, it's easy to pop a pill. It's easier to just go to the doctor, and I screw myself up and I let the doctor fix me. It's it's a kind of a laziness of some kind, maybe. I don't
Well, I think in our fast food culture that we have, this Zen like notion, I liken it to my thinking about how some things in Japan are so, they have this process of this internship where if you get hired into a company, you might spend a year or two attached to another person, watching, following, seeing what they're doing. They're not telling you what to do. They
Mhm.
just have you listen. They have you watch. They have you follow. And a lot of times
Mhm.
you have to do the work to come to the realization, through the experience, through the feeling of what it is.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And I kind of feel like it's that way too in martial arts, where we have this very kind of fast food society. I just want to know the move. Just show me the move.
Yeah.
And it's not about that. It's about something much more fundamental, of how you're grounded with the earth, how you're grounded within yourself, how you're observing what's in front of you. And now all of those things might dictate a particular move versus you trying to use your will to try to make something happen versus what's already in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's something that can't always be taught. It's more like it's contagious. Like we kind of absorb skills or knowledge from people. And one of my early teachers, Milton, said, Dan, it's not what you say and what you do is just a whisper compared to who you are. And it's when you say whatever you need to say to get people in the room. And then once they're in the room, just be yourself, just do what you do, and trust that something about who you are is contagious and people can absorb it from you. And regardless of how you talk about it, sometimes in spite of how I talk about it, people still get it. Sometimes because
Mm,
of the way I talk about it, and sometimes in spite of the way I talk about it. Like I used to say, like I have this, coming home breath. Imagine this feeling of being out on a hectic journey and you're busy and you finally come home. Well, some people home is a nightmare. It's where they're abused. It's where they're tortured. And they don't want to go home. And so, sometimes we think things make a lot of sense, but how the other person translates it and interprets it can be completely different than what we hope or expect. And so that's where, the breath really comes in. It's like this direct experience that people have, there's no substitute for that. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting your comment about the perception, right, being different. Like something as simple like we were, like box breathing, right? Box breathing is supposed to be this method to get calm, more settled, more, but yet it could mean something different to somebody else.
Yeah. 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 And I have my friend Oren Claff, the guy is the alpha male when it comes to you got 15, 20 minutes and you need to walk out with a check for 5 million, 10 million bucks. He's your guy. I mean, he's a master at putting together pitch decks and his I think his first book was called Pitch Anything. And the second book is Flip the Script. He's a private banker, investor in San Diego. Fantastic. But he raced motorcycles. He's helped NFL players get on teams. The guy's just brilliant, And and he I introduced him to Tony Robbins, and Tony hired him to come and speak at one of his events. And Oren called me up and said, "Hey, I just want to thank you because Tony called me and he said, and I got and just for the heck, I say, hey, what did he pay you?" And he said, 43. I said, 43 what? He said, $43,000. I said, get the fuck out of here. For like an hour? Like, holy crap. But then he was backstage and he's really good with the CEO, the analyst, those guys in the small room. He rules. But put him on stage in front of 10,000 people. That's not his favorite comfort zone. And he was literally, he called me up. Dan, I'm doing this slow breathing and it ain't helping. The anxiety's getting worse and worse. So I said, okay, well, let's try a different approach. Because, normally Anti-anxiety breathing is low and slow. If you want to lower your anxiety, breathe into your belly and slow your breathing down. And that's generally 80% of the population. That'll do it. Well, it wasn't working for him. It was actually getting worse and worse. So I said, well, let's use this analogy. Remember that in all of the classic Western movies, there's a scene where the stagecoach driver gets knocked off the stage, the horses get spooked, there's a damsel in distress in the stagecoach, and the horses, they're heading for a cliff, and the hero of the story jumps on his horse. He comes up alongside, he jumps over onto the horses, and he pulls them to a halt. It's like you have to come up to speed with the problem, and actually, or the plane is crashing, you got to like first, let it steer down and then take over. So I said, okay, let's just breathe quick. So ramp your breathing up so it matches your anxiety. And then it's like lassoing a bull. Now you can slow your breathing down. You've captured the energy and you can do it. And that worked for him. So, and that was the opposite, like breathing faster. That's not going to make your anxiety go away. Talk to anybody who knows anything about breathing. They'll say, no, don't do that. Slow your breathing down. So, yeah, what works for, some things work for most people, but
Hmm.
been the exception too many times in my life. And I have to assume that a lot of people I'm bumping into are also the exception. And that's why we have to get people to actually experiment and explore and practice and see what really works for them.
That's really interesting. You know, the to hear that and so succinctly that that we're all individual and that there is this reality of acknowledging that we need to find and be open to what can work for us individually.
Yeah. And a lot of people they don't trust themselves. We've been trained to think, what do I know? Like how can 10 million Buddhists be wrong? How and we're almost programmed not to really trust our own nature. And we miss a lot because we deny or ignore our own kind of intuitive hits because we haven't
Mm.
trust in our own abilities, intuitive abilities.
So that's something that I'm also very curious about, right? You've spent time, you've gone to places where there are other gurus, that people really worship and get around. And you've been there, and yet you have left, right? And you're separate and you're here.
Mhm.
How is that? How did you find that?
In some cultures, like in the Indian culture, they bow down, they touch your feet. I'm very uncomfortable with that, but that's like normal for them. And when I go to India and some of my students, they're like devotees. They're not just students. They're like their culture is like devotee kind of uh, programming,
Mhm.
and it makes me uncomfortable. And I try to interrupt them and grab them and stand them up. I'm not comfortable with people wanting to touch your feet, but in that culture, it's like shaking someone's hand. It's not what I make of it. It's just something very natural for them. So I try to when in Rome, do as the Romans, just be patient and accept their habits and patterns. But it's challenging sometimes, and it's very, we have to really keep an eye on our ego. It's really easy to, it's like react in a way to being treated like that. And so I have to I'm 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 very sensitive and on guard about. I try to make myself seem, normal and rude, and I fart and pick my nose and I swear. I'm trying to show that I'm not this, high guy that they, put you on a pedestal. and and uh, yeah, so I I just try to go along to get along, you know. I mean, I won't compromise my own values. There's a limit to how much I'll go along, and I'll draw the line. But in general, uh, and like I was a vegetarian for a long time, strict vegetarian, and then I went. It was in Russia in 1990, and I just stopped being a vegetarian. People spend 3 days preparing the meal and everything, and they butchered a cow just for me, or a goat or whatever. And then I go, well, I don't eat meat, or they want to drink, some champagne. Oh, I don't really drink, and I just couldn't keep it up. I couldn't keep up. I said, okay, what? Fuck yeah, all right, let's have goat head, and then I saw the beauty in it. They give the ears to the children so that they learn to listen. They give the tongue to the elder because their words are most, and it's actually beautiful when they break down the customs of butchering this goat and eating it. And I had to get around all of my stuff and start to really see the beauty in it. And if I was sticking to my guns, like I tried, look, I don't eat meat. I'm sorry, oh, but they killed the goat just for you, and they've been, you know, cooking it for days, and so I just surrendered. I said, oh, okay, and it was kind of liberating for me in a way. Like, okay, let me. What have I got to lose? Let me go along with how they feel and how they think. I can't lose anything for that. I'm not that attached to, you know, whatever I got going, and it was good exercise for me to surrender to that. And in Russia, it was often vodka and the banya, like holy crap, and getting beat with these birch branches and then drinking vodka and then laying in the snow and then going to the, okay, let's do what they do. And it was kind of cool. I wouldn't have done it on my own. And I did it because of the social pressure. I just wanted to go along. But I benefited from it. And it makes for a beautiful experience to surrender to whatever is the cultural kind of norm.
You think now in this age of, we talked about the fast food society, but the world of now AI, right, which is I think making things even more fast. Um, yeah, I think about what it must be like to be younger
Mm.
and now growing up in this age, and now the challenges of trying to find something authentic within yourself.
Yeah,
It's got to be more challenging now.
I think so. I mean, just kids are just born into this computer high tech world, and they're just ripe for it. And yeah, and even more than ever, with all the technology and everything, it makes the soft skills even more important. Emotional connection, being in your body, those things become even more important now because of how far and how fast we're going into AI and tech. And kids don't even have to think anymore. They just Google something or tap into Chat GPT, and they can pass exams. And so there's kind of there's a scary side to that they might be missing, developing certain abilities because they're depending on technology and stuff. So, but I think people have been saying that for a long time. I saw an image it was on a train in like the 1910 and 20 or something. And every single guy was on the train, had a newspaper in front of their face. And they juxtapose that to now when everybody's looking at their cell phone. And I'm going, well,
Hmm.
something similar has always been happening like that. It seems like it's a new problem, but it's another version of an old, constant problem, universal problem. And I thought it was really cool because it was juxtaposed to the people looking at their cell phone. And 100 years ago, everybody's got their nose in the newspaper. 50 people on a train, and they're all got their own nose in their own newspaper. So it looks like nothing has really changed on one level. It's not as new and different as we thought. And I imagine, when people stopped riding horses and they started riding in buggies, that seemed like, well, the old days, you're not really, or you're walking and now you're driving instead of walking and blah, blah, blah. Um, so, yeah, I don't know how new some of these problems are. We just have a new version of some old problem.
You think if I'm looking to help people get into the mindset of recognizing that breath is important, is there a gateway that leads to that? Do I tell somebody, you know what, you should just try tennis? And by doing this kind of a physical activity, it leads you to the recognizing that this breath thing is important, that leads you to here.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's something like that for people, that maybe for younger people? I'm just kind of curious now that you've been doing this a while. Like, so is there a strategy? Is there a way, as someone that's with other people, to say,
Yeah, we lean into whatever cultural hooks and metaphors that will give them. I use the like the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, painting the fence, and it wasn't until he realized he applied it that wow, he had been training something really important. Up till then, it was like, what the fuck? This guy's just making me paint his house and blah blah blah. And so you give them something like that, uh,
mm-hmm,
that they can then, so here, practice this, and then you put them in a real situation where they realize, oh my God, I remembered to take a breath before I said something that could have screwed everything up, or I started to get really anxious, and I took a few breaths, and sure enough, I got calmed down, I got clarity, and so they start to prove it to themselves. And I think we just have to find a way. I use the Back to the Future analogy too, where in the first movie, Back to the Future, he needed 10 million gigabytes to make the car run. But in Back to the Future 3, he's throwing beer cans and Coca-Cola and garbage, and it's turning it into fuel. And so I'm going, breathing is kind of like that, once you get your machine humming and things working, it's almost anything will work, once you have certain skills and you can apply them. So I try to lean into whatever current, cultural kind of stuff allows them to. It's almost like we need a reason to practice, So if I'm with a medical person, I'll try to frame things in such a way that, they can make sense of it if they're, so yeah, we have to speak other people's language. We have to get into the conversation in their head and inject our solution somehow. And I don't know. I mean, some people are really good at that. I sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm way off. But if I'm at 51 or 55%, I'm doing pretty damn good. I mean, 55% in a casino, in the long run, you're going to make a lot of money. It doesn't take much of an advantage in the long run. So, yeah, that's a good question because, yeah, you almost have to like make it up in each moment to suit the particular resistance or objection that you're trying to overcome. And but I think people will give it away if you allow them. They'll tell you what it is that you need to get over around in their own mind, because they'll present it to you, find out what is, where is their resistance coming from, where is their doubt coming from, and be waiting with, cut the legs out from under it ahead of time. And like in sales, answer their objections before they even, have a chance to voice them, and you can pretty much make the sale. But teaching is like sales, and sales is like teaching. Now, I've always thought to be a good salesman, you need to be a good teacher. And to be a good teacher, you need to be a pretty damn good salesman. And so teaching and sales, yeah, convincing people, it's the same game, you know. Yeah.
I would agree with you. Yeah. I I wanted to kind of start, talking a little bit about something a little bit more tactical, and it's a curiosity thing more. But my instructor Hickson Gracie, he's one of the things he's very well known for is what they call vacuum breathing, where he can suck in his stomach all the way in, and he can move around his stomach around, and I'm kind of curious. It's a pretty extreme thing to do.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
from a
It's a
yeah,
yogic skill. Yeah, it's a traditional good prana yogis. They're trained to do that, control those muscles and everything. Yeah, it's an art skill. Yeah.
and my understanding there are like stretch receptors or something like that in the stomach region and in that breathing chamber. Um, why would you do that as an athlete?
Yeah, I wonder too. And maybe I wonder because I can't do it. So I think, what do I need to do it for? But maybe in the process of developing that interoception and that internal control, in the process of learning that, you're gaining other benefits that are applicable in other ways and other levels, you know. Um, and maybe that's the benefit. Um, that in the process of learning that one thing forces you to develop other skills and abilities along the way, and that's the genuine benefit. Not that you can finally do all that weird stuff, but what it took to learn it, that same thing can be applied in other ways. That's
Mm.
my best guess as to why would I want to do that, you know, like yeah.
Do you think the, the observation of how other animals breathe and how that relates to what we should be doing in our activities? I think that there's been probably a big disconnection of that notion.
Yeah. I mean, on one level, heck yeah. Look how cats breathe. Look how dogs breathe. We can learn a lot from them. Natural responses and reactions and so on. Um, and they also don't have the ability to interfere in their own nature, right? So humans are the only species that can be, you know, unnatural. They can be inhuman. A dog cannot be an undog. A tree cannot be an unnatural tree. But humans can be unnatural. They can be inhuman. It's like a double-edged sword. The fact that we can be inhuman or unnatural means we can be superhuman. We can be supernatural. It's a two-edged sword, and animals don't have
Mm.
that advantage. So yeah, we can learn a lot from them, but we can also transcend in ways that other natural creatures on the planet are bound to their nature, that they can't influence their own nature either positively or negatively, and that's something that we have going for us, you know.
Do you think, oftentimes different types of breathing have been compared to getting similar experiences like other like an ayahuasca experience or some other kind of hallucinogenic kind of drug. Do you think the two are the same? Do you think they work in conjunction? I'm kind of curious how you think about the reality of all of that.
Oh yeah, I've gotten to states that I thought I needed LSD for, or plant medicines and mushrooms, and so I know that's possible. Yeah. We can use breathing to shift our brain waves and enter different states. That's a real thing. We can do something with our chemistry. And I mean, we have a pharmacy in our brain, and the brain can manufacture whatever chemicals are required to do whatever we want to do. And I think breathing and meditation and chanting and movement and all that combined can induce these states that are genuine and not chemically or artificial. Yeah, I'm more than a believer in that. I had experiences that really prove it, and I have a lot of people in sessions who get up after breathing session and they go, "Wow, I've taken a lot of drugs to feel like this." I go, "Yeah, exactly." So yeah, it's a real thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. I mean, and so I'm kind of, I'm curious if you have like is there like an underlying principle, some core truth thing, some word of wisdom that you would give people, given your just vast knowledge, experience? You've traveled to so many countries, met and presented and been with so many different people across the planet.
Yeah, the ability to open and expand your mind, open and expand your consciousness, be more open emotionally. I think that's a real key to growth and liberation, to be willing to get out of the box that you so sure of and you think is so real, and to be open enough to question the things that you're so sure about. I think that's a real important element in this, and the ability to let go of your point of view, let go of the need to be right, let go of pain, let go of tension, let go of programming, let go of conditioning. So my breathing mantra is sort of encompasses that: open and expand, relax and let go. And my formula for transformation kind of captures what I see, that every time, anytime I've seen someone experience a major healing, a huge leap in growth, some personal transformation, that something happened on their level of awareness. They changed the way they looked at something. They suddenly became aware of something they weren't aware of. And it's a real key to the transformation. Or that they let go of something. They let go of a belief. They let go of a point of view. They let go of a position. And in that letting go, something beautiful happened. Or the third is that they just took charge. They just took responsibility. And being in control of your breathing is a good practical application of: take charge of your breathing. When you're holding your breath, get your breath flowing. And when you're hyperventilating, get a handle on it and slow it down. And people realize, okay. So if I can wake up, become more conscious of what's happening inside of me and around me, I'm going to be safer. I'm going to be healthier. If I can learn to let go, a lot of problems, we don't need to try to figure out how to solve them. We can just let go of something, and that's the solution. And the third is to take part in our own healing and growth, and don't wait for other people to fix us. So that's like a mindset thing, but it's also practical skill of being able to let go of your breath, let go of tension, let go of your what you're so sure of. And so I sum it up, in those kind of two ways, let's say, or two models.
I
And
know how it,
my
I'm sorry,
final
go
thing,
ahead.
just to finish that,
Yeah.
every breath is a prayer, and every breath as a blessing. I think if people can get that, if you can experience every breath as a blessing, because it is, we're fucking lucky to be alive. It's a miracle that we can feel anything, even pain, and to be grateful, just to be alive. That triggers a lot of healing and a lot of growth. Um, and make every breath a prayer. So if you have an intention and you put the power of the breath behind it, that's like a prayer. And it works. And if you can experience every breath as a blessing, you're going to be living a really joyful life. If that's your actual experience that you recognize and acknowledge and experience. And I had my breath taken away from me. So I was forced to to realize what I had lost. And when I got my breath back, it was beautiful, and I never wanted to lose it again. I I value. I got. You don't appreciate something till you've lost it, and then you appreciate it. And so life gave forced me to kind of develop an appreciation for breathing that I never would have had if I'd even come to my own seminar. I wouldn't have gotten it. So every breath a prayer and every breath a blessing. And I dare you to approach breathing that way and not experience some remarkable benefits.
Wow. So I know we're going to be wrapping up here quickly, but I didn't know about. Talk to me about having not having your breath.
Yeah, I had an equipment failure. Um, it was off of Midway Island. It was about 150 feet. We were doing this cable. There used to be a missile range, underwater missile range around Midway Island. It's not secret anymore. All the missiles are on submarines. It's not there anymore. But they had this whole network of cables within like 100 miles of Midway Island. Any ships, submarines, anything showed up on this big grid in the command center, and those cables had been laid down in the early 1940s, and now it's 1970, 30 years. They were rusting, they were cracking, they were breaking, and there were blank spots in the grid. And that's like kind of scary because somebody could drop into one of those blank spots, right? So we were being sent to repair these cables. And anyway, so that we were on that job, and I had equipment failure. And your training kicks in, check this, check that, check this, and that was it. And I was tied to his name was Buntrock, Lieutenant Buntrock. He was an officer. I was a lowly enlisted guy, but he didn't have my experience with diving. Anyway, and I was tied to him, and my equipment failed. And so I pulled him over to me after I had checked everything, and I gave him the signal. I got no air, and he looked at me like a dumb puppy dog, like, what? What's the problem? I got no air. And we're trained. You can't. I wanted to pull the respirator, regulator out of his mouth. I needed to breathe, but you can't do that. They have to give it to you. And so I'm like, wait. And finally, and he was like, he had to like breathe before he could let it. And then when he took it out of his mouth and he sort of handed it to me, I didn't even get a chance to take a breath, and he pulled it back and stuck it back in his mouth. And I went, this guy is not going to help me. I'm on my own here. And I'd been a couple of minutes without breathing. And so I pulled myself loose and I just headed for the surface. And I'm trying to I'm remembering, don't get ahead of your bubbles. I mean, I wanted to get the hell out of there as fast as I could, but I'm really fighting my panic, and I'm going slow, and I'm exhaling so I can match my bubbles, and I exhale too much. And so now I've squeezed all the air out of me and I can't exhale anymore. I got no bubbles to to follow. And I was just about, and I had squeezed so much air out that if I relaxed even a little bit, I was going to suck in water. And a thought started to form, like, oh fuck, I'm not going to make it. And the thought didn't have a chance to form because right in that moment I saw the silhouette, the bottom of the boat, and I was about to complete this thought that, uh-oh, I'm fucked. But instead, the thought just turned in a flash into, oh, I'm going to make it. And just then I had, like, the old cameras, the shutter, the spiral shutter. My vision just went, yeah, and I blacked out. And then I heard later I had pulled my life vest unconsciously. I pulled my vest, And I must have done that. I don't remember doing it, but I bobbed to the surface, thank God. They pulled me into the boat, and I started having these surreal experience of giant black lips like sucking on my face, like and it's like weird, surreal. And then suddenly my eyes were open, and my favorite guy, Charles W. Brooks, they called him Duck. Um, he was sitting over me, and the sun was behind his head, and he looked like this light, like an angel, and he was smiling, and I'm thinking, "Wow, that's Doc," and I've never seen him so happy. Like, why is he so happy? And then he says, "So, Doc, are you going to breathe?" And I went, "Breathe, like breathe." And as soon as I tried to breathe, everything just closed right up. The harder I tried to breathe, the less it was I was able to breathe, and I went black again. And then the weirdness of the sound is what shook me back to awake. It was the weirdest sound, and so weird, like a sound I'd never heard before. And it was so weird and unusual that it kind of shook me into wakefulness. And I'm thinking, what is that weird sound? And where is it coming from? And then I realized it was coming from me. And it was my throat was all tightened up, and the air was whistling. But I realized, oh, I'm breathing. And in that moment that I realized I was breathing, everything opened and relaxed, and the breath just poured into me. And the breaths were huge and totally effortless. And it was like, and 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 I wasn't breathing molecules of air. I was breathing bubbles of light, and they were bursting everywhere inside of me. It was ecstatic. I discovered the ecstatic nature in the breath. It was literally orgasmic. I mean, I'm laying in the bottom of the boat with a big hard on. How inconvenient and inappropriate. But there was nothing. I was turned on by life. And then when they called in a helicopter, and the helicopter was like beautiful, and the vibrations of the helicopter were orgasmic, and I'm thinking, holy crap, what has happened to me? I mean, everything made me laugh, everything made me cry, and every breath I took was just beautiful. And I've never been able to shake that experience. And I wanted everybody to have that experience. There's something so ordinary as breathing can be filled with ecstasy. And I just, how can I teach that? I drown somebody and resuscitate them and hope that nobody signs up for that seminar. And so thank God I discovered rebirthing. In 1976, University of Massachusetts, my mentor, Milton Young, I met him in the parking lot one morning, and he was giddy. He was floating. And I said, Milt, you look a little weird. He goes, oh, I just was rebirthed. That's about breathing. You'll probably like it. And that was it. I had my first breathing session, and I felt like all of my PTSD, my traumatic brain, I mean, all the stress from the military, it was like skin sliding off a snake, and my senses was so raw. I felt and heard things, and the sky was so blue, and clouds were so white, and the trees were so green. And I thought, man, where have I been? I'd never noticed how beautiful everything was. And it put me back into that experience, that ecstatic experience when I was being resuscitated. And so I thought, aha, I finally found a way that people could have this experience. And I've been teaching breathing ever since.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Well, Dan, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You inspire me, Ben. I'm down to the last. I got a napkin.
Oh, wow.
145. So I'm pretty much to the end. And I've got a lot of things circled and underlined and notes and stuff. Fucking brilliant, man. Thank you so much. I really love what you
Thank you so
man,
much.
you you put some real lessons in here that are applicable to life and business and everything, and it's real. It's coming from somebody who didn't just read it in a book and is copy this. It's obvious it's coming from somebody who's embodied this knowledge. So, man, thank you.
I
Thank
really appreciate it, Dan.
Good. So 10
Thank you.
after. I have a really cool call. He's one of my coaches. I meet with him once a month. Everybody needs to have a coach. And so his name is Jim Morningstar. He's a clinical psychologist in Wisconsin. He's been doing rebirthing for I think a year longer than me. So he's like
Wow.
my senior. And so I'm looking forward to our monthly call right now. So thank you.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Brother, be well, stay well.
You too.